Rejoice, you forgotten masses, toiling and laboring in the service of unworthy gods. Be thankful, for your world is on the verge of a great and blessed change. Welcome to Miniatures Rundown. I'm Kevin, and today we're going to attempt to unravel the duplicitous nature of the Changer of Ways. Hopefully we can find the top 5 War Scrolls within the new Disciples of Tzeentch battle tome for Age of Sigmar. This battle tome has changed significantly in its faction pack, from fate points to mechanics that make your enemy feel as though they are fighting illusions. There's also many powerful War Scrolls, and these are my top 5. Just barely making the cut at number 5, we have the Changeling. Now this is a classic model that goes all the way back through the history of Warhammer into Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and continues his legacy here in Age of Sigmar. His identity has always been true to his character, in flux, and sometimes he's been a wizard, sometimes he has been a piece that affects your enemy's ability to do things, and in this case, he's kind of taken on much more of a support role. His statistics are nothing to really laud. 6 health, which is relatively beefy for a wizard model. He is wizard 2 with a save of 5+ and a control of 2, very slow at a speed of 5. His staff is his usual wizard bonking staff. Nothing really to talk about there. However, the things that really make him stand out are his puckish misdirection. So we'll cover this in a future video, but the new Disciples of Tzeentch have so many ways to move your models around the board and replace models and really change the shape of the battlefield. And this even more plays into that, where the effect of it is that it's a passive, and while they are wholly within 12 of this unit, friendly Disciples of Tzeentch units can use the redeploy command even if they were set up in the same turn. So normally, if you set up in the same turn, you can't use any move abilities, of which redeploy is one of them. Now, however, this gets around that, and there are many ways in which you can use redeploy in your opponent. Well, you can use redeploy in your opponent's turn, but there are many ways in which you can bring units in your opponent's turn and set them up. So, and then being able to use redeploy on top of that to either control your opponent's movement by moving things in to move block them, or move them further away to make charges more unlikely, is a really strong ability. It does require them to be wholly within 12 of the Changeling, and the Changeling himself doesn't want to be too close to any kind of danger. However, this could be a really, really strong ability. His other ability, Arch Deceiver, is you can only use it if he's masked by illusion, which masked by illusion, once again, we're going to do a deep dive into the mechanics of this tome later, is it basically allows you to set up units in reserve with some different restrictions from what you would normally expect for things like, say, Stormcast being held in Azir, for instance. It mainly allows you to manipulate where your units are and where they can come in your opponent's turn, which is extremely strong. And so any unit can be held in reserve, quote, masked by illusion. So when he is masked by illusion, he can pick a model in a friendly Disciples of Tzeentch unit to be the target. He can immediately use a spell ability, and when he does so, you measure the range and visibility from that spell from the target. And the target is treated as a caster for the purposes of other abilities such as Unbind. So when he's held in reserve, he can cast spells through other models that are currently on the board, which means that his influence of being able to cast the spell lore of your choice, of which Tzeentch has 2 spell lores, and they're both very good, is spread out across all of your units, which is really strong. It makes it so that he's not personally in danger of being attacked or being counteracted upon. And even if things have abilities which do damage when they unbind, it doesn't affect him. It only affects the unit in which he is casting the spell through. Really strong ability. Whispers of Treachery is a signature spell. It casts on a 7. You pick a visible enemy unit with an 18 to be the target. And then for each 5 up, you inflict 1 mortal damage. So it's your usual Horde Buster spell. Not amazing, not bad. He is Wizard 2, so he has opportunity to use many spells and throughout the course of the game. And so having a little Horde Buster available, not bad. So that's what really puts him in my number 5 spot. Swooping in at number 4, we have the Lord of Change. The very iconic monster of Tzeentch Demons, the Lord of Change, his avian form, staff or sword, and spells, flinging spells across the battlefield, and this guy's no different. He has boasts 14 health with only a 5-up save, which is not really good for a monster, especially a flying monster, which has no ability to hide from enemy reprisal, and a 5-up ward save as well. So a 5-up ward does keep him a little bit safer. However, he is really vulnerable to enemy attack. Any kind of rend whatsoever, and specifically range damage, makes him very easy to deal with. So you want to protect him, keep him in back. He does have an 18-inch Storm of Weirdfire, which is okay. 5 attacks, 3s and 3s, no rend, and D3 damage. But that's not why you take him. You take him because he's Wizard 3. He's a Wizard 3 flying monster. So he can cast several spells and be anywhere he really needs to be. And not to mention that he has several abilities that make him a particularly good pick. One of them, as we talked about in previous Chaos Battle Tomes, it seems that the titular Greater Demons tend to have an ability that summons demons back that have been destroyed, and this one's no different. He can pick a non-hero Disciples of Tzeentch demon for 1 command point, and then you set up a replacement with half the number of models rounding up, wholly within 12 of him and more than 9 away from all enemy units. So usual replacement rules. But he can bring back some really strong units such as Pink Horrors, which are still really difficult to get rid of. Their mechanics have changed, but they are still a very annoying unit and great for holding objectives. His signature spell, Temporal Manipulation, is you pick another visible friendly Disciples of Tzeentch unit that was not set up this turn, which is really important because there's lots of ways to set up Tzeentch units throughout the course of the game. That's within wholly of 18, and then you cast. It goes off on a 6, so really easy to cast. The target can use a normal move ability as if it were your movement phase, but it has to end the move closer to him. So you get some extra movement, and him by himself is pretty fast, so he can get up the field if it suits him. He doesn't want to be too close to danger, but he can move up further upfield, and he can basically drag something along with him. Now, he can't move something that was already set up this turn, so that does shut down, cheeky possibilities for being able to move stuff that had come in a reserve. However, getting any extra movement and being a normal move and not a die roll, aside from the cast, is really strong. There are so many things that move really quickly in this book that I think this could really benefit from this particular spell. And he's Wizard 3, so that means that you don't often have to sacrifice using a different spell in order to use it. So you always kind of have this in your pocket. Especially if you use Magical Intervention to cast it in your opponent's turn. There's all kinds of ways you can yank things out of threat range, put things in threat range for a countercharge. I think it's a really useful, very techy spell. It only has to end closer to this unit. It doesn't necessarily have to move as close as possible. It just has to end closer. So you can really move, sideways and just end slightly closer to him than you started. You don't necessarily have to move directly towards. So there's a lot of, as is befitting of Tzeentch, lots of tricky manipulation you can do with this. His passive, Locus of Impossibility, you add 1 to casting rolls for this unit. So really, Temporal Manipulation goes off on a 5 on dice rather than needing a 6. In addition, you subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks that target friendly Disciples of Tzeentch demon units while they are wholly within 12 of this unit. So him and any demons that are near him are harder to hit, which is good because his durability is not all that great. Now, don't let that fool you into thinking that he's very durable, because a concentrated attack is still going to bring him down and any demons that he wants. It does make things like Pink Horrors even more difficult to deal with, just because they have so many wounds and a 5-up ward that they're just going to be sticking around for a lot longer than your opponent would really like. But don't expect that to keep himself alive. All those things together, I didn't even talk about his melee profile because it's wholly unimpressive. 6 attacks, 4s to hit, 3s to wound, which is 3s to wound for a monster is not great. 1 rend, 3 flat damage, it's okay. You really don't want him in melee. That's not really where he wants to be. So, but overall, I think a really great model. And that's why he's got my number 4 pick. Floating gently down at number 3, we have the Zangor Enlightened. Now, these have often been important unit for Tzeentch in either their own army or in years past, the Beastman army. I think that these guys are still an incredible and very useful unit. They basically take up the heavy cavalry slot that Tzeentch would have in their roster, but don't let that make you think that they're particularly durable. However, they do boast an incredible movement speed of 14. They have 4 health apiece and a 4-up save. No ward. They have quite a few wounds and a decent save, and extremely fast. So all that combined together makes them a little bit more durable than you might think at first, but don't overextend them. They will die if anyone really wants to put the effort into it. Their weapons are what really make them shine. Their Tzeentchian Spear and Vicious Beak. Beaks have now moved to outside of a weapon that's almost not worth rolling for, to being just combined with weapons. That's true again with all the Zangor type models. 3 attacks apiece, 4s to hit, 3s to wound. So 4s to hit, not all that great. Rend 1 and damage 2. Charge plus 1 damage. So on the charge, which they will be doing most of the time with their high movement, is going to be charge 3 on the is going to damage 3 on the charge, which is really good, and what you would kind of expect from a heavy cavalry type unit. The disc, teeth, and horns are not much to write home about. However, they are 2 attacks apiece with 4s to hit, 3s to wound. They do have a rend and D3 damage, so you can get some surprising damage from the discs. But what makes them very, very useful is their all too predictable ability in the combat phase. And do it any combat phase, yours or your opponent's. If this unit charged this turn, you pick one of the following effects to apply for the rest of the turn. This unit's Tzeentchian Spear and Vicious Beaks has crit 2 hits. So them only being in a unit of 3, 6 with reinforced, and with only 3 attacks apiece. They're not throwing a lot of attacks, but crit 2 hits can really throw that into another amount of high damage attacks that could really break a line. Or you can add 1 to the rend characteristic of this unit, Tzeentchian Spear and Vicious Beak. So if you're going up against something that has strong armor, 2 up, 3 up saves, being able to take that to rend 2, and there are other ways to manipulate saves in this book as well, you can really break through that hard wall of armor that would be normally difficult, because a lot of these models don't have a whole lot of rend naturally, but this being able to go to rend 2 with 3 damage on the charge, suddenly you're going to be breaking through a lot of things that would normally be able to hold a line against them. Overall, I think these are just a great unit. I think that they'll serve you really well. You have to protect them. They do fly, so you can't conceal them with terrain or whatnot. However, their move of 14 means that they can stay skirting outside of the threat radius of a lot of stuff and jump in and do damage. Now, they are also, their keywords, it's important to know, that they are Arcanite and Warp Flock. So Arcanite keyword will allow them to interact with a lot of buffs from a lot of officer type models that are also in this book. So there's a lot of opportunity to get a lot of buffs to really even take these guys beyond what their War Scroll can do. And that's why they have my number 3 spot. Appearing from nowhere at number 2, we have the Gaunt Summoner. Now there's 2 versions of this model. There's a Gaunt Summoner that both is on foot and on the disc. And I'm speaking specifically of the one that's on foot, because I think he has a spell that takes him above the disc version, even though he has quite a bit less maneuverability. Gaunt Summoner has a kind of weak profile as far as durability goes. Only 5 health, 5 up save, but a 5 up ward. Only move 5, and his staff is the usual wizard bonking staff. Nothing to really worry about too much. He does have a crit mortal range weapon. 3 attacks at 4s and 3s, 1 rend, D3 damage at 12-inch range. It's fine. I wouldn't expect it to do a whole lot, and really I don't want him all that close to begin with. So the one thing that he shares with his brother on the disc is Masters of the Silver Towers. So the whole lore behind the Gaunt Summoner is that he's the Lord of a Silver Tower, and the Argent Shards are kind of an extension of the Silver Tower. So he has a lot of synergy with them and is tasked with protecting them. So Masters of the Silver Tower, to not belabor the point, enemy units cannot end a charge move within half inch of a friendly Argent Shard that is wholly within 12 of this unit and was set up on the battlefield in the same turn. So there's a lot of Argent Shards can move around quite a bit, and they can be set up if one of them is destroyed. So there's a lot of manipulation with their position on the battlefield. This helps protect them quite a bit from countercharge, and it helps them somewhat against enemy charges in general if they're manipulated in your opponent's turn. You can still be piled into and still be attacked, but it's a nice little thing that if they appear, your opponent doesn't have a vector to countercharge them in your turn and ruin some plans that you have. So one of the things I think makes the Gaunt Summoner, and this is true for both versions, really important and strong in the Tzeentch roster, is the ability All Belongs to Tzeentch. Both versions of the Gaunt Summoner have this, and they both function the exact same way. And what it is it's once per battle at the start of any turn, the declaration is you pick an objective you do not control and that you controlled earlier in the battle to be the target. The effect, very simple. You control the objective. Now, I cannot overstate how cool this ability is. So many times when you start a game, you deploy something just barely toe on an objective, and then you have to move away from it because whatever is on there needs to participate with the rest of your army. And then your opponent sneaks something onto there to steal it from you, and now it's a big effort to get it back. And what this does is it gives you more pressure to be able to threaten to take that objective back. Either your opponent has to stay parked on the objective to maintain control of it, or you take it back. And I think that's just a really powerful ability. There's no die roll associated. There's no spell casting cost. It's not a prayer. It's just something you can do once per battle. And I think that's just a really, really strong ability for the Gaunt Summoner. Gaunt Summoner is a model that has gone through a lot of changes over the course of Age of Sigmar, and I think this is probably maybe not his most dynamic entry for his War Scrolls, but it certainly is very interesting. And moving on to the last reason I really like the Gaunt Summoner as my number 2 pick is his signature spell, which is Leaden Limbs. It's casting cost of 7. You pick a visible enemy unit with an 18 to be the target and make a casting roll. Until the start of your next turn, you have the target's move characteristic, and the effects of the fly ability do not apply to the target. That's an incredibly strong spell for a casting of 7. And it really does hinder some armies completely. I'm trying to think of my KO where my Ironclad is now moving 5 inches and can't even fly. That's crazy good. I really like that spell. It has a pretty respectable range of 18 inches, and there's often ways to get a +1 to casting in this tome. So I think that this War Scroll really just is a winner and takes my number 2 spot. Squawking in at number 1 is Kairos Fateweaver. Now, often one of the most popular and iconic models of the Disciples of Tzeentch tome. He still takes the cake here for me at the number 1 spot. His stat line is a little bit better than the Lord of Change. He boasts 2 more wounds at 16 rather than the 14. I guess the extra head gives you a couple more wounds. Still control 5. Still a 5-up save with a 5-up ward. So still pretty fragile. Definitely not a frontline fighter. He also lacks a ranged weapon of any kind. So while the Lord of Change's ranged weapon wasn't particularly impressive, mainly due to its lack of rend, it could do some interesting spike damage every now and again. Kairos doesn't even have that option. And his melee ability is okay for a monster of his cost. The Staff of Tomorrow is 4 attacks at 3s and 2s with 1 rend at D3 damage. I really just don't like D3 damage. I feel like it always betrays you. And then his beaks get their own profile with 5 attacks, 4s and 3s, -1, 2 flat damage. He's not doing a ton of damage in combat, and you really don't want him there anyway. The thing that really makes this guy special is, of course, his abilities, just like many other things in the Disciples of Tzeentch tome. Master of Destiny. Now, Kairos has always had an affinity for being able to see the future, and sometimes not seeing competing visions of the future, and this ability really plays into that. So just to read the ability, because it is kind of lengthy and kind of complicated, the effect is, it's a passive, if this unit has not already engineered the outcome this battle round, so this is during the battle round, instead of making a casting roll, unbinding roll, banishment roll, hit roll, wound roll, or save roll, for a visible Disciples of Tzeentch unit wholly within 12 inches of this unit can engineer the outcome. So you can do this once per battle round for any of those instances of rolls previously listed. If the roll would have been a D6 roll, you can use a value of 6 for it that cannot be modified. If the roll would have been a 2d6 roll, you can use a value of 9 for it that cannot be modified. So basically, in a way, you kind of get your fate dice mechanic back but just for 1 roll, and you always have a good dice to put in that place. Specifically for casting and unbinding, just having a pocket 9 is really, really good. I just can't overstate, like, knowing that your spell is going to go off, or knowing for a fact, especially specifically for unbinding, because you already know what the value of that they cast a spell on, knowing for sure that you can unbind that spell after it's been cast is just incredible to have in your pocket. His other passive, Mastery of Magic, When you make a casting roll for this unit, you can change the lowest d6 to match the highest d6. It just makes it like he's going to get his spells off most of the time. That's just a really, really good passive. Another passive he has, once again, is Beacon of Sorcery. You add 1 to casting rolls and unbinding rolls for friendly Disciples of Tzeentch Wizards while they are wholly within 12 of this unit. In addition, if a friendly Disciples of Tzeentch Wizard wholly within 12 inches of this unit unbinds a spell, no command points are spent for that wizard to use magical intervention command in that phase. I mean, that's really good. Basically, if one of your wizards wholly within 12 of Kairos manages to unbind an enemy's spell, he basically can Uno reverse that and cast his own spell in return without spending a command point. Once again, you don't have to do anything. There's not anything associated with this. It's just something that happens on Kairos, and it's always active. Really strong. Once again, Kairos is going to be a big target for your opponent, specifically because of all these things that he just does by just existing on the battlefield. And then he has his signature spell on his War Scroll, Fateful Reverse. Pick an enemy unit with an 18 to be the target, then make a casting roll. It casts on an 8. Until the start of your next turn, if the target charged in the same turn, friendly Disciples of Tzeentch units in combat with the target have strike first. Target weapons cannot be affected by charge +1 damage weapon ability. So you can not only make it so that things that charge the enemy target strike first, you can also make it so that if they have lances or if they have other +1 damage on the charge, specifically +1 damage on the charge, that will blunt that charge. That's really, really strong. It goes off on an 8. Both of the effects apply. You don't have to choose one of the effects. Remember that he gets a natural +1. And if you really, really need this to go off, he can just throw out his pocket 9 and get it off. Which also makes it really unlikely to be unbound. 9 is not an easy number to unbind. Like, this is a really great War Scroll. The only thing he doesn't do is he doesn't participate in the fight very well. You do not want him in combat because of his poor save characteristics and his pretty mediocre combat ability for his cost. But overall, the things that he brings to the table for Tzeentch is so strong. And of course, he's a beautiful model and a very, I would say, iconic model for the faction. So that's why he has my #1 spot. These are my top picks from among the offerings in this battle tome. What would your picks be? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this content and want to see more, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.